So for this video, essentially what I'm going to do is show you some of the different ways that you could have completed the practical that we did in class earlier this week. Sometimes what can happen is we can end up doing things in ways that are not quite as efficient as they could be, and sometimes I think watching somebody else do something shows you how you can combine some of the techniques that you've used on different types of projects into figuring out your own workflow. So I'm following the instructions from our practical bouncing ball, and the first thing that I want to do is go up to my composition, and under composition settings I want to make sure that I've got the 1920 by 1080. I'm going to switch my frame rate to 24 because that's what's required, and then instead of the duration of 10 minutes and 4 seconds, which was apparently something I had before, what we're going to go for is 1 minute and 30 seconds because we have frames, seconds, and minutes. I'm going to keep the background color as black, and I'm just going to call this bouncing ball. I'm going to click OK. So the first thing it asked me to do is to make a red ball bounce across the screen. So there are a couple different ways to do that. I'm going to just make a simple circle. So we've got a red fill color, so that's great. And I'm just going to make a circle here, and press Shift to make the circle actually a circle. And so now what I want to do is come down here, and in my transform properties, what we're going to do is we're going to animate the position as we move across the screen. And so we want to make sure that I'm seeing my whole window. So we've got the fit up to 100%. So I have my circle, and I'm going to take it and pull it over here, and I'm going to activate my time vary stopwatch. And you can see that when I do this, it brings up my position at this center point, the 0, 0. And I actually want that to attach itself to the circle so that when I move things I can actually kind of see what's happening. The keyboard shortcut for this is Y, and it's called the pan behind tool. And if I click on it and I drag over, I can place it in the center of my circle. And so you can see the new value down here for my anchor point. So now we'll extend this so that it's the duration of my composition, and I'm going to move forward. We'll go forward 5 seconds in time, and we'll go back to our regular selection tool. Keyboard shortcut is V, and I'm going to drag it, and we'll come down here, and then we'll go 5 seconds forward, and then we'll go 5 seconds forward. And I'm going to treat this as the floor of my piece, and then 20 seconds, and we'll come and we'll go out. And so if I come back and I play through, and if I deselect, it will not show me the path. And you can see how we've got the the slow bounce of the red ball. So it hits the floor at least twice. It might not be the most dynamic of animations, but so far that's what we've got there. And there it goes. So now the second part is to make a green ball bounce across the screen. And so if I select this and if I do Command D, it duplicates my shape layer. And so if so these are both effectively that red ball. If I take a look at my ellipse for the first one, if I click here, I can open this so that I can switch the fill color to green, and we'll click OK. And so now it looks just like we have just one of the green bouncing across the screen. But if I take this and I move it over just a little bit, it's going to take those anchor points with it. And so if I press play now, you can see that the green will start just before that 5-second mark, and it's going to go along the same path. Now essentially the big difference between the green And the red is that at this point on the floor with my green ball, I need to change the look of it so that it appears to kind of squish as it hits the floor. So there's a couple different ways that I can do that. If I go into my transform properties, I can go into scale, and if I change the the X and Y connection so that it's no longer scaling both of them at the same time, and you can see that I'm on my position. If I use the XY coordinate, if I drop the Y further down, it will make it look like the green ball is hitting the floor. So if I'm on my point here and I activate the time varies stopwatch for my scale and I go back a frame or two, then I can switch this back to 100% and we can make it look like things are transitioning as they go. And so then on this upswing, what I want to do is elongate it so can make it look like it's bouncing a little. So there we can see it squish and then start to come back up. And if I was really particular about it, I could go back in and change the keyframes of the positions so that it looked a little bit more like it was hitting the floor, but I'm not going to worry about that at this point. But so just kind of seeing how it looks. And then when we get up to maybe this point, we're going to go back to that 100% so that it's a regular circle. And if I want to essentially copy those scale points so that when I get to the next bounce, it does basically the same thing. So we can copy that, and then here we can paste. And so it will do the same transition as it hits the ground there. So now that I have my green ball, I can see on the next list it says make a blue ball bounce across the screen. It should hit the floor at least twice. Ball should change in shape when it hits the floor and make it get smaller as it bounces. So now what I want to do is again duplicate the shape layer. We're going to move it over again. And underneath the contents of the ellipse and the fill, instead of green, I'm going to change it to blue. So again, I don't need to create a whole new composition layer just for this blue ball. We can pull it together here. And if I come through, we can see that it changes shape as it hits the floor, and we want it to get smaller as it bounces. So basically what we want to do here is if we go into transform and we've got scale, and remember scale is something that's automatically going to be keyframed. This is where it hits that 100%. And so here, let's go back to our 100% and we've got that keyframe there. And if we go further, I'm going to, at this point, knock it down to, say, 80% on both the X and the Y axis. So now it's getting smaller as it bounces. And so what we have to be careful about when we come here is that we have the preserved values for the way that the ball is going to change shape as it hits the floor again. And so if we go back using these little arrows to navigate, you can see that we're at 100, 100. So we're going to change this to 80, 80. And if we go to the next keyframe, you can see that we're at 80, or we're at 160. And so if we do 80 and maybe 50, so we're still getting the flattening of the ball. And if we go forward again, we've got 80, and maybe we'll do 95 here to show the elongated version. And here, if we do 80, 80, we've got that same small ball. And then finally, what I want to do is for the next piece, as it goes off the screen, we're going to drop the scale down to, we'll be dramatic, we'll say 40. So for this, it wasn't about creating the different keyframes, it was about creating new values for the existing keyframes. And then finally, if we go back into my position, and if we're on this positioned keyframe, we'll drop it down a little bit there. So again, happens kind of quickly, but at least it's there. And this is sort of a quick and sloppy version of how everything's going to come together in the practical. So far we've basically built 1, 2, and 3 off of the same shape layer. The next thing is it asks for a yellow square that bounces across the screen and should hit the floor at least twice, and it should spin as it bounces. And the next one after that, so the number 5 option, is make a purple square bounce across the screen. It should hit the floor at least twice, spin the square as it bounces, and make it change from a square to a circle over time. And so it's a lot easier to do this with a modified mask than it is with a shape layer. So to save time, I'm going to go ahead and make a yellow layer. So we'll do a new solid, and we'll make it yellow. And we'll click OK. And now I'm going to create a square. And we'll use the Shift key to make sure things are in line-ish, close enough. And so this is going to be the object that I make bounce across the screen. And so again, we want to have this so that it lasts for the duration. So we'll extend it here. And again, this is something you could change in preferences if you wanted. And we'll just come back to the beginning of the timeline here, and we're going to move the square over so that it comes in here. And so same as before, we'll just use the transform properties and the position value to make the square bounce over time. And because I've got everything else bouncing on the 5 seconds, we'll make the square go a little at just a different tempo, I guess. So we'll come down here. And again, just moving forward. And then sending it off the screen. So there is part 4. The only thing I've got left to do is I need to spin the square as it bounces. And make sure that After Effects doesn't die on me. I should probably save my file. So we'll do File, Save, and we'll do a new folder. And I'm going to call this Atoms_AE bounce. Just in keeping with those naming requirements that are listed on the practical. So now basically what I want to do is come back to the beginning of the composition, at the beginning of the yellow square, and we're going to keyframe rotation. And then as we go across, we can say that it spins 4 times. So easy enough.